إبراهيم الخليلي الجزيرة Northern Gaza Palestine.
Foreign ministers from 24 countries are condemning Israeli killings at food sites run by the notorious Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. In a joint statement, they say lethal force must not be used at distribution sites, and civilians, humanitarians and medical workers must be protected. We call on Israel to provide authorization for all international NGO aid shipments and to unblock essential humanitarian actors from operating. Immediate, permanent and concrete steps must be taken to facilitate safe, large-scale access for the United Nations, international NGOs and humanitarian partners. All crossings and routes must be used to allow a flood of aid into Gaza, including nutrition supplies, shelter, fuel, clean water, medicine and medical equipment. Earlier, my colleague Sami Zeidan spoke with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. He denounced Israel's plans to seize Gaza City, saying Israel has committed war crimes but not genocide.
I don't know what they have in mind. I can say what appears to be the only possible interpretation. And the only possible interpretation is that it definitely keeps the war going indefinitely, because we are trying to understand what may be the goal or the objective of this military operation. We are not sure that we can understand it. And as you know, all the former chief of staff of the Israeli army and the senior generals and the commanders of Mossad and of the Secret Service, they are all having the same opinion that this war should end now, that there is not any objective for a military operation, which was the cost. And the cost may be Israeli soldiers, the hostages, and also many Palestinians in Gaza, which we definitely don't want and don't need to kill.
So I got to ask you, as you know, you were a senior figure, obviously, in the Israeli body politic, the Israeli prime minister, in fact. We're at a stage now where there is a long list of international figures and institutions who say Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Do you think it's time to recognize that?
No, I quite frankly, look, I've been criticizing the Israeli government, and I didn't hesitate to accuse the events that are taking place in Gaza sometimes as war crimes. There is not a genocide. There is not a policy of genocide. There is not even a policy of war crimes. There are war crimes committed, okay? But this is not definitely not a declared policy. This is not something that one can identify any particular order or command that was given by the army or by the government to kill indiscriminately people. Things happen because the war keeps going.
Palestinians in Gaza are mourning 4 Aljazeera journalists who were murdered in a targeted Israeli attack on their media tent in Gaza City. Correspondent Anes Al-Sharif was one of the most prominent voices courageously documenting Israel's genocide in the northern section of the Strip. Mahad Karikeh was a correspondent too, who frequently reported on the devastation in Gaza City. Ibrahim Al-Taher was a cameraman who helped to bring images of the unfolding horrors in Gaza to the world, as did Mohammed Nofal. His pictures showed the world the daily hardships endured by Palestinians. 2 NGOs are bringing a case before the UN's top court against senior Israeli military commanders for allegedly authorizing the murder of the 4 Al Jazeera journalists. The Hind Rajab Foundation and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights have named the Israeli Chief of General Staff and 7 others. They also accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of presiding over a strategy to eliminate journalists. Their case is based on investigations reconstructing the attack, intelligence reports, and expert military analysis. The ICC has already issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes. Ian Williams is the president of the Foreign Press Association in the United States. He says Israel is targeting journalists in Gaza to hide the crimes it's committing on the Strip.
When they killed Shireen Abu Akleh, they denied it for a long time and then said, whoops, it was a mistake, and then refused to do anything about it. This is a whole new departure. And they have now declared that journalists are fair game in Gaza. And that is one of the reasons why they don't allow foreign journalists in. They're trying to control the flow of information. And that is very much dependent on Palestinian journalists like Sharif, who have really bravely and beyond the call of duty have been trying to report on what's happening in Gaza. I think, you know, the whole issue of control of information by shooting the messenger is now the Israeli agenda. They want to make sure that only their version gets out, and they get more and more frustrated as people persist in showing the reality.
The White House says the summit in Alaska with Vladimir Putin will be a, quote, listening exercise for President Donald Trump. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tempered expectations for a quick ceasefire deal to end the Ukraine war.
This is a listening exercise for the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present. And so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end. The president has deep respect for all parties that are involved in this conflict and are trying to bring this conflict to an end. After Special Envoy Witkoff returned from his meeting with President Putin in Russia, his first phone call was to President Trump. And President Trump's first phone call was to President Zelensky and to our friends in Europe to keep everybody in the loop about where the United States can see moving the ball forward to end this conflict.
White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Kimberly, 3 days away, we're getting a few details. I mean, it's all very sketchy, this meeting, but, you know, we've got very little to go on. What do we actually know, though?
Yeah, well, we finally learned the city. We only knew the state up until a couple of hours ago. We know that this meeting is going to be held somewhere around Anchorage, but the precise location, is it going to be the military base near there? Is it going to be at a nearby resort? We simply don't have any answers. And that's because, according to the White House press secretary, she says the mechanics with the Russian counterparts are still being worked out. As you heard there, she said that this goal meeting is to essentially listen to Vladimir Putin from the part of the U.S. president. And that is a far cry from the U.S. president's initial August 8th deadline, when he initially said that Vladimir Putin needed to accept a ceasefire. So there's been a real shifting of strategy and really goals in terms of what can be accomplished. What we know from the hearing from the press secretary is that the U.S. president is not only expected to update European leaders following his meeting with Vladimir Putin, but also it's being reported that sometime on Wednesday, he will also hold a call with European leaders in order to prepare for that summit.
Kimberly, is this a bilateral, or could this go on to include perhaps the Ukrainian leader, Vladimir Zelensky, here?
We know that there's been interest on the part of the Ukrainian leader, but in the words of the U.S. president, he says that Vladimir Zelensky has been attending meetings for 3.5 years, and according to Donald Trump, nothing has happened. So he says he wants to talk to Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, bilaterally, and there is no timetable for a trilateral meeting that would potentially end this conflict, according to the White House press secretary.
Kimberly Halkett there, joining us from Washington, D.C., right outside the White House. Several wildfires are burning throughout Europe as a heat wave blankets much of the continent. Fires burnt through several neighborhoods near the Spanish capital, Madrid, Monday. In Portugal, 3 large wildfires are being fanned by strong winds and hot weather. And in Montenegro, several homeowners in Piperi have returned to find their properties destroyed. Jonah Hull has more.
The backdrop to a Mediterranean summer. Not just sun, sand and sea, but smoke, ash and firefighting aircraft. In Montenegro and Albania, from the Turkish coast to the islands of Greece and the slopes of Mount Vesuvius near Naples, wildfires thrived across parched landscapes and in heatwave temperatures. Further inland too, Portuguese firefighters battled flames north of Lisbon, while an enormous fire front bore down on homes and apartment buildings near the Spanish capital, Madrid. Firefighters in the municipality of Tres Cantos working through the night on Monday, with authorities declaring the fire under control on Tuesday morning. And every summer, as the fires grow more frequent, fierce and widespread, the costs to homes and livelihoods increase.
It's hard, very hard. You can see for yourself. The hardest thing for me is emotionally. Everything that can be paid for and bought can be compensated, but the memories that burnt in these 4 rooms and in the large attic of our house cannot be compensated.
For a moment, I didn't know what was happening. Heavy smoke, heat, fire. Some people barely escaped alive. Fortunately, there were no casualties, but there was a lot of material damage. Some people's houses, vineyards, barns, hay, everything is burnt. What can I say?
Many blame climate change. Europe is the world's fastest warming continent, creating conditions ideal for fire to take hold. Those conditions are also ideal for a beach holiday. The two things now frequently combined. Jonah Hull, Aljazeera.
Still ahead on Aljazeera.
While 50 patients have received a prosthetic limb, many others are still waiting. And the number, it grows by the day.
We report from a rehabilitation center in Gaza, which has the highest number of child amputees in the world. Plus, a reduction in global aid and donation is threatening the lives of nearly 1 million refugees in Kenya.
The prevailing stories weather-wise out of Europe are of heat wave and wildfires. And they're not going to be appeased, I'm afraid, because although we're in August, so days are getting slightly shorter. I know, I shouldn't say it, but it's there. Pressure is high and the sun is in the sky. The only exception temporarily is in the far north, and particularly Scandinavia. But even here, that cloud's going away. London's at 28, Paris is at 36. We've broken records in France and around in the Adriatic as well. And I think the heat will tend to move slowly eastwards as showers start to become a bit more prevalent in France and Spain, but they're only coming and going, to be honest, and you still end up with 37 in Bordeaux. Now, the temperature in Vienna represents this slow rise, I think, in Eastern Europe. The average is 26, and you're well above that. You don't necessarily hit a record, but you get close at 36 by Friday. Morocco's heat's been high as well, and it remains pretty high. South of that, of course, we've been watching the seasonal rains, which have already generated, as is their wont, one hurricane that its development went through Cabo Verde and caused a huge amount of damage. And the next batch of rain is significantly further north than maybe it should be for this time of year. So we're in Mali, southern Mauritania, more especially, of course, in the Guinean Highlands and the Gambia.
How did Trump go from the president who wanted to end wars and promote commerce straight to a wartime president who's rocked the global economy? What's Israel's endgame in Gaza? After Trump's mini-summit with 5 African heads of state, what changes in U.S. engagement with Africa?
A quizzical look at U.S. politics, the bottom line.
The latest news.
Military service in Cambodia is rarely enforced. Conflict with Thailand, however, has stoked renewed nationalism, a sentiment that could increase compliance with law.
With detailed coverage.
In July, Russia launched 3,800 drones and 260 missiles into Ukraine.
From around the world.
150 countries now recognize a Palestinian state, with more likely in September when world leaders gather for the General Assembly.
Holding the powerful to account as we examine the US's role in the world on Al Jazeera.
We're back, and you're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. Israeli strikes have killed more than 70 Palestinians across Gaza Tuesday. Many of them were killed in Gaza City, where the Israeli government has approved a plan to seize the area. It would mean forcibly transferring nearly 1 million Palestinian people to concentration zones in the south. At least 18 of those were killed trying to get food at a distribution site near the Netzarim corridor. This is a site which is run by the notorious Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF. 100 people have died trying to get food near those sites since May. Now, there are more child amputees in Gaza than anywhere else in the world. After 22 months of Israel's war, thousands of children have lost one or indeed more limbs. At least a quarter of those injured have life-changing injuries. Muath Al-Khalut has this report from Gaza City, where a Qatari-funded rehabilitation center has resumed services, and that comes after it was damaged by Israeli shelling.
Israel's war on Gaza has left behind more than just destroyed buildings. It's left deep, lasting wounds. 3-year-old Abdelkarim Abu Jarboua has lost everything. His home, his entire family, and his leg. Now, he's learning to walk again. A specialist at Hamad Rehabilitation Hospital for Prosthetics spent weeks helping him, hated by the trauma the little boy has endured.
One of the hardest things we face is helping a 3-year-old child accept a prosthetic limb. It's hard enough for adults, let alone young children. We spent a lot of time just playing together, building trust, and helping him understand what the prosthetic is, how to use it, and what benefits it offers.
This hospital in northern Gaza is supported by the Qatar Fund for Development and is one of the few lifelines for thousands of amputees. But it's overwhelmed and faces numerous challenges.
We face serious constraints, limited resources and capabilities due to border closures, and we have very few medical staff, not enough to meet the needs of the increasing number of amputees. Also, getting to and from the hospital is very difficult because it's located in a red zone.
Still, there is hope. Raed Hamada says getting a prosthetic changed his life.
The first time I brought my daughter with me, we were both happy and excited. She was especially thrilled. Her first comment was, "Dad, leave the crutches and let's go back home." The streets and roads are difficult to navigate with crutches and without a prosthetic. But now that I have one, I can even carry a small bag, something I couldn't do before.
For amputees, walking again means beginning again. While 50 patients have received a prosthetic limb, many others are still waiting, and the number grows by the day. Muath Al-Khalut, Aljazeera, from Gaza City, Palestine.
Israeli Air Force reservists have been protesting in front of the Ministry of Defense headquarters in Tel Aviv. They're demonstrating against the government's decision to expand the fighting in Gaza and calling for a deal to release all captives. To Africa now, and starving refugees in Kenya are about to lose a vital lifeline. The World Food Programme says it's forced to cut food aid because of reductions in global aid. That's something which would affect nearly 800,000 refugees who do live in those camps. Catherine Soy reports from the Kakuma refugee camp in the northwestern part of Kenya.
The heat is relentless. The land is dry and yields very little. This is the Kakuma refugee camp in northwest Kenya. And for the hundreds of thousands of people here who have escaped violence and drought, food aid is all they have. Tantatin Mawazo is a Congolese refugee who says she can't do without these rations, which she gets every 2 months.
If there's no more food, I don't know what I'll do. There are no jobs here. I have no business. There's no other alternative for me.
The World Food Programme says donor money is running out. Most of the food comes from the US, but after US aid cuts, shipments have stopped. Now only the most vulnerable, families headed by children, the elderly, pregnant women, and disabled people will get rations. 30% of the population will get nothing at all.
We have refugees who are doing business, and we have refugees who've just recently arrived. We have child-headed households. So we are looking at each and every one based on who they are and trying to see if we can channel our assistance based on what their need is and not necessarily because they are a refugee.
Many refugees say this is unfair, but those tasked with helping say it's the only solution.
This is just a small fraction of food that is needed to feed hundreds of thousands of refugees. But the supplies are running low, so aid workers have to make difficult decisions about who gets the food and who doesn't.
Lonnie Michael Goni says his family will get nothing. He says he has a disability and can't fend for his children.
I will not survive, and even if you see those children, there is no place where do I take them.
The government is pushing for what it calls Shurika Plan, urging refugees and local communities to share what little there is to reduce aid dependency. But with resources so scarce, it's a delicate balancing act.
Now we are saying to God, only God they help us. We are not have anything to help us.
Everyone here says the situation in the camps is a disaster waiting to happen. Catherine Soy, Al Jazeera, Kakuma refugee camp, northwest Kenya.
Now to the United States, where President Donald Trump has declared what he calls a crime emergency in Washington, D.C., placing the city's police force under federal control and deploying hundreds of National Guard troops. Trump made the decision after a recent assault on a former government worker. And all of this does come despite police data which shows violent crime in the U.S. Capitol being at its lowest rate in more than 30 years. Meanwhile, the U.S. and China have extended their trade deadline just hours before new tariffs were due to begin. Donald Trump signing an executive order suspending tariffs on China for a further 90 more days. The move buys time for Beijing and Washington to negotiate a long-term trade agreement. China also announced parallel moves shortly after Trump's announcement. South Korea's former First Lady has been arrested after a warrant issued by the courts. Kim Kyung-hee is accused of bribery, stock manipulation, and interference into an investigation. She's the wife of the jailed and impeached ex-president Yoon Suk-yeol. He faces trial over a botched and unconstitutional bid to impose martial law in December. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodian workers are fleeing Thailand, even as a fragile ceasefire between the countries appears to be holding. Emotions are still running high after 5 days of cross-border fighting last month that left several people dead. Many migrant workers are now returning home jobless because they fear retaliation. Barnaby Lowe has this report.
The Thai-Cambodian border on Phuket City, easily one of the most popular routes for tourists crossing from Bangkok into Cambodia. But in the weeks since fighting between the two countries' armed forces erupted late last month, the steady stream of travelers has been replaced by waves of returning migrant workers. Many say they fear harassment by Thais, who blame Cambodians for the recent flare-up.
I want this conflict to end already so that Cambodian workers in Thailand, like us, don't have to suffer. We've had to endure enough threats of violence.
But the choice to return home also meant leaving behind jobs that enabled them to send money to their families.
My parents are old. They are 60, 70 years old, and they can't do anything. I'm only there to earn money and send it to them, and for my children to study.
Thailand and Cambodia have been in a dispute over pockets of land along an 800-kilometer border for decades. But the latest fighting has been the worst, and the timing couldn't be more devastating for Cambodia's economy, with U.S. tariffs hovering above 30% for months.
There are simply no alternative employment for the Cambodians who are returning. And this is exacerbated by a suspension of factory manufacturing investment due to the reciprocal tariffs that were first announced on April 2nd by the Trump administration.
Those tariffs have since gone down to 19%, after both sides agreed to a ceasefire. That truce, however, appears to be hanging by a thread. Thailand has accused Cambodia of planting new landmines that have injured patrolling troops in the last few days. And Cambodia is demanding the Thai army return captive soldiers.
We do expect that both sides are going to draw back some of their military personnel, and they will maintain current positions. So, however, what they will not do is they will not come to an agreement on where the border is.
In meetings last week to discuss the terms of the ceasefire, both countries also agreed to allow observers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, giving hope to civilians caught in the conflict that tensions could ease just enough for a semblance of normalcy. Barnaby Low, Al Jazeera.
That's it for me, Rashad Salamat. You can find more information on our website, aljazeera.com. The news continues on Al Jazeera after the bottom line.